What is a poet? A poet is a singer of songs. They are of life and what life means. A poet walks with truth.
Paul Laurence Dunbar, the son of former slaves, born after the cannon of the Civil War stopped thundering across the nation. In the evenings, Joshua Dunbar, after a day in the fields, stood and looked toward the North Star, the Star of Freedom. Following the North Star, Joshua Dunbar took the Underground Railroad out of the South and slavery and into Canada, where he could live as a free man. The guns of the Civil War brought him back to the United States, and he enlisted in the 55th Massachusetts Colored Infantry. After the war, Joshua Dunbar's travels took him to Dayton, Ohio, where he was to meet and marry Matilda Dunbar, a former slave from Kentucky.
Paul!
Yes, work and play were a part of Paul Dunbar's life. But most of all, Paul liked to hear the stories his father and mother told of the days of slavery, the Underground Railroad, and the booming guns of the Civil War. He could not always understand what it meant, but someday he would remember. At the age of 6, his first poems tumbled from his mind. At 13, he was reading his poems to his Sunday school class. The magic and the fun of the Dunbar family went out like a candle when Joshua Dunbar died. Paul was only 13, but now he had a man-sized job to do. He must work to help bring home money to keep the family together. In high school, Paul became president of the Philomathian Society and a member of the High School Times. In his last year, he was elected president of the literary organization and editor of the paper. As a farewell to his high school days, Paul wrote the graduation class song. Armed with a diploma, Paul Laurence Dunbar entered the most critical period of his life. Undaunted by this turn of events, Paul Dunbar sent his poems to various newspapers. His poems appeared in print, a few at first. Later, a letter arrived from a poet who was famous for his poems about people in Indiana. James Whitcomb Riley praised Dunbar's poetry.
I've got a little motto that's homely, though it's true. Keep plugging away. It's a thing when I have an object that I always try to do. Keep plugging away. When you've rising storms to quell, when opposing waters swell, it will never fail to tell. Keep plugging away. If the hills are high before and the paths are hard to climb, keep plugging away. And remember that success comes to him who bides his time. Keep plugging away. From the greatest to the least, none are from this rule release, be that toiler, poet, or priest. Keep plugging away.
Why so sad, young man?
Oh, I was hoping to get my book published, but,
You a writer?
well, a poet.
William Blatcher loaned Paul the $125 needed to publish the poems, with the agreement that he be repaid when the first books were sold. The sale of Oak and Ivy was more than enough to repay William Blatcher, the kindly publishing manager. Oak and Ivy was reviewed in the Toledo Blade. A promising young attorney read the review and was impressed with the Dayton poet and invited him to come to Toledo, Ohio and speak to a prominent organization. Paul prepared for his recitation very carefully. The main speaker was a doctor, a resident of Toledo who had just returned from a trip to the South. They're incapable of being educated. I have heard of a young man who has achieved some recognition as a poet, but he perhaps is an exception.
Our next speaker is Mr. Paul Laurence Dunbar.
I had prepared a special selection for this occasion. However, I have decided instead to read a selection from my book, Ode to Ethiopia. O Mother Race, to thee I bring this pledge of faith unwavering, this tribute to thy glory. I know the pangs which thou didst feel when slavery crushed thee with its heel, with thy dear blood, all gory. No other race, white or black, when bound as thou wert to the rack, so seldom stooped to grieving. No other race, when free again, forgot the past and proved them men, so noble in forgiving. Go on up. Our souls and eyes shall follow thy continuous rises. Our ears shall lift thy roots from spring, and proudly tune their lives to sing of Ethiopia's glory.
With the applause still sounding in his ears, Paul Laurence Dunbar became a symbol that true genius was unrestricted. He was invited to lecture and give recitations of his poetry to the American people. With the help of friends, Paul's second publication, Majors and Minors, made him famous around the world. Novelist William Dean Howells reviewed Majors and Minors.
He is, as far as I know, the first man of his color to study his race objectively, to analyze it to himself, and to represent it in an art as he felt it and found it to be.
The review appeared in Harper's Weekly. Following the publication of Majors and Minors, Paul contributed 4 works to the field of literature. His poems were filled with love, wit, pathos, humor, and tragedy. He could write of life in 5 lines.
a crust of bread, and a corner to sleep in. A minute to smile and an hour to weep in. A pint of joy to a peck of trouble. And never laugh but the moans come double. And that is life.
In his travels, he visited England. And there he received much acclaim for his literary genius. Paul Dunbar's prose works include 4 novels: The Uncalled, The Love of Landry, The Fanatics, The Sport of Gods, and numerous sketches, among them a one-act musical. His most distinctive work was his dialect poems.
When the evening shadows come a-gliding down, falling black and heavy over hill and town, if you listen careful as you can, so that you bound to notice just the dropping of a pin, then you hear a funny sound across the land. Lay low. That's the calling of the boogeyman. Ooh, ooh, hear him as he go along the way. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Don't you wish the night had turned to day? Ooh, ooh. Hide your little peepers behind your hand. Ooh, ooh. Calling of the boogeyman.
His dialect poems were his major contribution to American literature. They reflected the humor and pathos of those who lived during the tragic Reconstruction period of American history. Paul Laurence Dunbar died February 9th, 1906, at the age of 33. He has often been compared to Robert Burns. For in a world of discord, he too dared to sing his song about nights bright with stars, about the secret of the wind and the sea, and the answer one finds beyond the years. In doing this, he vindicated the spirit of youth. Youth that is the same in all ages. Youth that believes in itself and is not overcome. That, above all else, is his title to fame.
Because I've loved so deeply. Because I've loved so long. God, in his great compassion, gave me a gift of song.